I want to give you guys a little bit of background on where I came to my conclusion about hybrid mixing being good or bad. Okay? It's important to understand, and I want you guys to really believe this. Look in my eyes. Me, wanted to believe more than any of you that I could sell every single piece of gear I had and work in the box. I wanted to believe that I could work in an airplane. I could work in a waiting room. I could grab my laptop, be in any hotel all around the world and work on mixes. I wanted to believe this more than you could possibly believe that. All right? Like, I wanted to believe this more than anything, because who wouldn't want to get that kind of a windfall, sell all your stuff, get all that money and put it into other things that maybe just better monitoring speakers when I'm in the studio, anything, right? And work all in the box and have that ease of use where everything is completely recallable all the time and just be living like that. That's what I wanted more than anything. But let me explain something. For whatever reason, I was lucky enough to be able to afford this Apogee DA16 a long time ago, the DA16X, all right? When I bought that, it was for the purpose of trying out summing mixing, and it wasn't that expensive. It was $750 when I bought it, okay? It gave me 16 channels to be able to feed a console, and this was years ago. And at that time, I had a console that I still have. That's this old Allen and Heath console from either, I think it's like the early 80s, okay? And it's an all analog console. It's not an inline console, okay? But, using some workarounds, you can actually take direct signals out of it. So even though it doesn't have direct outs, you could take a jack and put it in a little bit of the way, like, it was a trick people used to use. You'd shove it in the insert spot, and that could send a direct signal out of it. The problem is you wouldn't be able to use the EQ and different things on the board when you did that, but you got 16 mic pre's out of it, and they had groups, so you could send stuff to groups and EQ, because it would work that way, where the EQ would actually work when affecting the groups. So there was workarounds. This is a business of figuring out how to make stuff work. So it's part of the reason why I love this business, okay? But just follow me for a second. I'm using that console, having, at this time, I think I may have even been using Ableton, although I had used Pro Tools prior. I just, at that point, maybe switched to Ableton. I can't remember what I was using at that moment. It might have been Pro Tools, but because I was going back and forth between those two DAWs, because depending on the kind of music you're working on, sometimes Ableton is easier, right? But this was back then. It's been years since I haven't used Pro Tools. I haven't used Ableton in years. But let's talk about this, okay? I feed my 16-channel mixer, which this is a console, keep in mind, that wasn't very expensive. It was somebody I was working with had no use for it, and it was like I cleaned it. They gave it to me. I cleaned it up. I had to spend a little money on it, but it was very little. It was like, I didn't spend that much. So that's why it was like, oh, I could try this out. I'll have this console since I had it already, and I'm just going to buy the DA, and I can feed things into it and hear the difference. So using these Apogee converters, which this is the same ones that I did the test against the Burl against, using those, feeding this Allen and Heath console, I was able to hear what I would call a little bit of a difference. It wasn't a huge difference, but it was a difference. And that term little bit, everyone has their own definition of little bit. So it's not helpful. I understand that. But to my ears, there was a bit of a difference. Let's fast forward. I wound up thinking to myself, even on these 16 channels, like, I would be able to use the console, and here's the difference, right? I'm sending signals into it, and I'm summing them down to a stereo bus. That stereo track is being printed into Pro Tools or Ableton, whatever it was. I felt like the results of that were a little bit better. So this just stuck in my head, okay? I ultimately determined that this console, like, every console has a flavor, a vibe. I'm having a really good couple replies with this guy, Wheelie Mix, who commented on the last video, and he's got great it's a great conversation because it really illustrates the point of what we're trying to get to. There's no egos involved. The guy's completely civil, and it's really easy to have a conversation with this guy. So when he told me his way to work when he uses a console, it just sparked a couple other ideas in my head that I wanted to share with everyone because I think it's important. When I talk about mixing in a hybrid way, in and out of the box, if you're just thinking to yourself, pro converters matter or they don't matter, that's not as like, listen to this. That's important conversation. That's an important thing to talk about. But the converters are being used to feed a console, a summing mixer, something out of the box. That thing also imparts a bit of a sound signature, a tonal quality, if you will. And as Wheelie Mix is saying, he has this SSL console G Plus at his studio that he's run stuff through, and in his tests, he doesn't agree with me. All right, what he in that I basically said that if you're summing things through the console into using the console to push back against you, because that's what a console does. As you push into it, it pushes back. Okay, it's and then all your channels that are spread out get pushed down to two in the analog world, one stereo channel, and that stereo channel is also pushing back. It's all up. It's this constant push pull that is a big part of the sound. And Wheelie Mix does mention that when you're pushing it hard, you do hear a difference. When you're not pushing it hard, you don't really hear a difference. So there's a couple things to understand here. What he's doing to keep his console in his workflow and make it make sense to him, and this is a good idea, okay? It's just one that it makes me question certain things, but check it out. So what he's doing is feeding all his stuff through his console so he can use EQ, compression, anything on the SSL, let's say. But he'll then print all his tracks back into the DAW so that they're all printed individually, and he can mess with things if anybody needs tweaks, anything, recall, can you switch this sound, make this a little lower. So he's able to do his tweaks in his DAW without the console in front of him, okay? So that makes sense, except it does make me have to use the part of my brain that says the summing mixer is a big part of why I love mixing out of the box. The fact that it spreads the channels out and it pushes them down to two in the analog domain. In the analog domain, you have a little more forgiveness. Things can be a little over zero, and it's okay. Digital clipping is not the same as analog clipping. It doesn't sound the same. And every console you use, this is going to sound a little different. The more you push it, the more different it will sound. And what that means to me is when he's taking his stuff and sending it to two channels without the console, like if he's just putting it in the console and then feeding it back into his DAW, that can't possibly create as good of a sound as when you're in the analog world, sending all those channels to the stereo bus without the DAW being involved and just printing into the DAW after that. Just the summing in the analog world can't possibly be the same. It's got to sound better. And this is just from my experience doing that I believe this. Okay, and his response to that was in his tests, he actually found that sometimes the SSL adds a bit of a negative quality. He does mention that when it's pushed hard, it does sound different and maybe better, I think. I don't know if he said maybe better, but it sounds different, okay? I don't want to misquote him here, but he said it sounds different and not preferable sometimes. So he is leaning on the fact that sometimes it actually makes it worse to do that. And I've heard things like this before, like the SSL G Plus series, the two bus comp in there, it doesn't have that ability to basically roll, to keep the low end out of it. Because it doesn't have the ability to take the low end out of the compression signal, it sucks some of the sub away. It does do that. It takes some of the sub out, the sub frequencies. So because in other words, they're so big, they're eating up the compression before everything else. So it's going to remove a little bit of those kind of naturally. I get that. A lot of the modern, two bus SSL compressors have that ability to roll that off. All right. And they're on a lot of compressors now, but back then they weren't, right? So let's just say this, okay? I could agree that every console is going to sum a little differently. That's why my Allen and Heath one, the difference was like a little bit. It was there. It was a difference. I felt like when I listened in the car to two mixes, one that I did all in the box, and then one, as soon as I ran that through the Allen and Heath and listened to that, I was like, okay, there's a little difference. I don't know what it is. I can't quite quantify what it is. It just sounds a little better. And keep in mind, I spent at that point only $700, right? It's not like a ton of money in the audio world, all right? It's a lot of money. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not the way that you could spend on certain things like a pro level converter. The point is, I'm over there thinking, this is a little bit better, but it wasn't enough better for me to continue working like that in the continuous future. I thought it was only a little better. Now, fast forward a little bit of time, I wound up getting a couple pieces of outboard gear that I felt really helped the workflow. And when I did that, it occurred to me that I want to try outboard summing again, and I want to basically do it with something better than the Allen and Heath to really know if it was only a little better because of that older console. And mind you, that thing had a cool sound to it too. And it was very clean. I could not believe how clean that was. The preamps in that thing actually sound great. That's why it's still in my studio, still connected to my patch bay, and sometimes I use it for certain things because why not? When you have good pieces of gear that are cool and good in any way, you keep them around. You may find uses for them later that you didn't even know you had at the time. So keep them around. But I decide to try something else. I take a bit of a plunge and I buy a summing mixer that it was touted as a very good summing mixer. And I saw a lot of guys, everybody I talked to was kind of telling me that this thing will make a big difference. So I know about return policies, all right? I order the thing, I connect it all, and I say to myself, wow, there's a difference now. And it wasn't a little difference. There was a difference, okay? Now you have to realize this. When things go down in your studio, you're going to have to figure out a way to work around because clients just don't accept, sorry, man, it's going to take an extra however long. That would kill a business. So you can't do that. You have to keep working. And in a similar way, the way Andrew Sheps did it, which was he didn't have the console. He had to do some mix on headphones in his laptop. And that's how he figured out when he sent the mix to the client that the client didn't notice. They didn't say anything. So he thought, well, maybe it's fine. All right. That's how he got to his conclusion. You got to realize when you're at a certain level, I just want everybody to understand human psychology a little bit. If you're at the level where you're getting hired all the time and you're an in-demand guy, Warren's like that too, all right? He's being hired. He's getting stuff. The guy has got one of the best teaching channels there is. There's no question. I respect his opinion 100%. I don't think he's lying. I believe that he believes everything he's saying. I 100% believe that. But let me also say, when you're getting hired all the time and you have to move around, there's other things that start to play into your psyche, whether subconsciously or consciously, they play in. And that is ease of use. I got to be in a hotel. I'm on this plane. I'm not in my studio. I'm not around my stuff. And even if it's only 5 or 10% of the time, you're going to want to believe that you can work in the box. And when my stuff went down, like the DA went down, and it was because of the power supply. And somebody else mentioned that the power supply goes down on those things. They're 100% right. Quick tip, if you do have a DA or something where the power supply goes down, order a new one, okay? And then when you open it up to switch out the power supply, and what you may find is what happened with me, which is just by switching out the power supply, for whatever reason, like I switched it out, it actually didn't work with the new power supply. So I thought to myself, this must be the slightly wrong one for this or whatever. But there was a light that went on inside it when that happened, even though it didn't power up everything. So maybe there's a different problem, but all I knew is, okay, this is not working. even though this weird light just turned on inside that wasn't on before. So I took out that new power supply I bought. I put in the old power supply, and the freaking thing started working again. I don't know why, but now I have 2 power supplies and a working machine. I don't know if this power supply is called, maybe it's the jumper power supply. I don't know, but it jump started the thing somehow where now it works with the old power supply. So if you ever wind up with those things, try that. Just try that, okay? But moving on. So I'm dealing with my setup for a long time, which had 24 channels feeding the summing mixer. It had 16 of the DA16X and 8 of these Digi 192s feeding the 24 channel summing mixer, okay? Once the DA went down on me, that's when I had my moment of, okay, I'm watching. Everybody learns from different people at different times. For some reason, Andrew Sheps was like my go-to guy. I still love listening to him, but what will happen is certain people you won't actually be able to listen to until you're ready to listen to them. It's very interesting how everybody's style of teaching is slightly different, and some teachers hit certain people home depending on where they are in their life. Like, it'll affect you different, and you'll tune some people out and you'll be able to listen to other people. And it's because of where you are in your life. So I recommend, if you can't listen to certain people, or you just like, this guy seems boring to you or whatever, just wait a little bit of time and then check it out again. When you're at a slightly different point in your life, in your career, in your learning experience, you'll find different people are easier to listen to. Trust me, it'll change, because that's what happened with me. But anyway, I started listening to Andrew Sheps like crazy. And believe me, all I wanted to do was work in the box. I pictured my life being able to take vacations and still get things done the way I would by being anchored to a studio. I believed this without trying at first. I was like, I believe this. This is so true. In today's world, that's all you need. Today's world's different than 20 years ago. In the box is so good now that you can do it. That was my mindset. 100% my mindset. I didn't even own UA plugins until then. I went out and bought a bunch of UA to be able to justify working in the box. I was like, maybe I'll take every edge I can. He's working in the box and using UA. So maybe working in the box without the UA is an extreme disadvantage. So I'll get UA. I've heard how good their plugins are. Let's start there, and I'll make this work. I was committed. All right. 2 satellites committed of UA. I went in to really do this. And I have to tell you, night and day, I have to use these words, night and day, because I could not make a mix sound the same way in the box as I could out of the box by a long shot. I couldn't do it. Maybe you guys can. Maybe it's just me. I'll leave the door open for that. But I have to say, I don't think so. I really don't think so. What it wound up being for me was a forgiveness by using stuff in the analog domain that was so much different. And again, I'm going to point a little bit to the fact that it could be the exact gear that I'm using that makes that so. But at this time, when I was doing this, when I figured this out, I wasn't like, the burl could be out of the chain completely, and just the DA from the Apogee working with the 192 converters, which are also old, and just running that through the summing and into the mix bus chain. And the difference was still huge. The difference was palpable, unquestionably different. I believe this. That's why I gave up on that dream of being able to do the hotel thing or whatever. And I have to think to myself that these guys that believe that, do they really 1000% believe it? Or are they weighing ease of use while they believe it? In other words, if you went into this and you're somebody who's getting hired all the time and you're still getting hired, it's in your interest to believe it doesn't matter. It is. I mean, if you can make your life easier and everybody still pays you and everybody still loves the work, then I guess it's fine. But you also have to question stuff like, these people that are paying you, are they really listening? Are they really 100% going to know the difference between you switching from one console and using that to using in the box? Are they really paying 1,000% attention the way the guy is who's working on it? I don't know. Maybe not. And if they're hiring you because they know who you are, is that going to slightly skew their judgment and make it sound in their heads better no matter what you do? Because you're a Grammy nominated, Grammy winning guy? Maybe. This is some human psychology here. You got to realize this stuff is out there. When you think you can mix all in the box, maybe they can because of their skill level. I can't ignore that. Maybe they're just so much better that they can mix in the box. Maybe it's possible. But from my experience, okay, no chance. There's a not even close. Not even close. Is it possible I'm doing certain things, or rather not doing certain things that you have to start doing when you work in the box only? Maybe I'll entertain these possibilities. In other words, I can see it from all angles, guys. But the point is, when you, I can liken this to a really crazy, this is a ridiculous example, but this is what it makes me think of. So I gotta throw it out there. You ready? In my opinion, it means so much. It makes sense. It hits the nail on the head. You ready? Here we go. It's like working close by to a bathroom, and it's your private bathroom, and you know where it is. Okay? That's working in a hybrid way, in my opinion. Because it's like when you have to go to the bathroom, you know where it is. It's right there, a couple steps away, so you can get there easily. That's what it's like to mix hybrid. That's what it's like. And the other way in the box is like you got to look for a public toilet every single time you mix, and it's always moving like a TARDIS. It's moving all over the place, and you never know where the thing is. You can't track that thing, so it's an untrackable TARDIS, and you're sitting there and you're mixing, and you always got to get to the toilet because the toilet, let's say, is the end of the mix. That's the finished product. You always got to find the toilet, and it's never in the same place, and it's very hard to get to sometimes. Could be on the top of a mountain or at the bottom of, but you got to figure out how to get to that TARDIS. Why would anybody want to do that when they could just walk next door to a bathroom? I'll tell you, the only reason they would want to do that is if it was easier for them in every other way. If it was easier for them to be able to take their laptop with them, spend less money, be in a place where they're all over the world, go on vacation with their family, if they could still make clients happy, then they'll seek out the bathroom and climb mountains for it, man. They'll do what they got to do that because the other things are more important. But let's remove all that. Let's say you were one isolated person and you've got no attachments and you've got nobody calling you to be anywhere. Let's just say that. Then does it really make it a better thing for you to constantly seek out a moving TARDIS wherever it is? A constantly moving bathroom when you gotta go to the bathroom really bad, number deuce, you're looking around for this thing all the freaking time. Whereas I always know where it is. It's right there. There's the bathroom. To me, that's how it feels. It feels when I'm doing stuff in the box that there's just, oh my God, like what is wrong with this? What do I have to do to get it there? And I'm always I'm seeking to the point where when I'm not doing that, I just find it. It's just right there where it always is. And that is why I think guys today still like hybrid style. That is why I think people will still mix in this fashion until the digital domain changes completely. And we're not there yet. Because when you remove all the things, if nothing cost any money and everybody could do everything, this conversation would be very, very different. And if you removed all those attachments of life where people don't have to fly all over, because think about that, the more successful you become, the more you're required to be everywhere. It's not just you get to stay where you are anymore. Now you got to move around. You're constantly moving and shaking and moving and moving. You're always moving as a person. So of course, you're going to want to believe that mixing in the boxes makes sense. All right? Of course, you're going to want that. but that doesn't make it true. And the guy who's sitting there at home wondering why his stuff doesn't sound the same, in my opinion, you're doing a disservice to that guy by not really letting him know what's really good. The bathroom could be right there, but instead you got to go find it. Good luck. Good luck. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't want to make this a thing where it's like, and this, I had to start with the other part because I also believe it's not really about how much you spend in the money department, because the converters really do matter. But with my Apogee converters for $750, I was able to hear a difference on a console that cost me, I don't know if it was like, I think I spent like $300 or $400 on that thing at the time, because it was somebody's used console in the back of their studio that they didn't need, and I cleaned it up and took it home, and the guy paid me. I mean, I'm sorry, I paid him a little bit, and I was able to get that, and to me that made a huge difference. So just trying it in any way that you can. This is where I gotta talk about this for one sec. Whatever gear you have, I just watched this awesome Rhett Shull video on how this great guitarist, Mike Gordon, he's getting a particularly cool sound by running through a Porta Studio as his preamp, okay? It's doing a thing to his guitar that is just kind of something that's elusive in the world of now. It's not like a readily available tone. Rhett's been playing guitar over 20 years, and he couldn't distinguish exactly what was happening and had to deep dive to figure it out. So the point is, if you're got anything around you, another great comment, Dirkhead dropped the VHS tapes comment on the video. These are great comments. Anything you have in your possession that you could use, whether it be running audio through VHS or using a Porta Studio as your preamp, or using an old, Tascam 6-track, or literally a Yamaha mini disc 4-track, or a Korg 12-track, like, doesn't matter, man. Whatever you have, use it in some fashion. If it's too dirty, run it in parallel. You could use and be creative with every single thing that you have at your disposal. Anything you've ever bought. Start thinking like that, because that will start to help you be able to create things that other people just aren't doing, and it could lead you somewhere great, and nobody knows where that's going to be until you get there. And that's the amazing thing that's got to put this spark and fire under you to keep it moving, to keep trying things, to never settle on only in the box, and never settle that way. You got to look at everything you could possibly use and think of it that way. But one other thing, I have to mention that the concept of recalling every knob on a console that I mentioned, and like notating it all down and recalling it, there's so many things people need to understand about this. Back in the day when people were doing that, there was no email most of the time. Like, we're talking about pre-DAW. If we're talking about that, no email, no ability, even if to send stuff immediately and for people to hear it, which changes their expectation. So in other words, they were expected to be in the room to hear the mixes. There was a different thing, all right? And changes that could be made, it was understood there was limited changes that could be made, and they knew that too. So these people were more likely to accept things, okay? The world was different. Also, the money that people spent on audio back then was dramatically different. So you can't just sum up, oh, doing this now is lazy, and doing it then is not lazy. It's so much bigger than that, all right? It's way more easy to do that and justify an extra 1 hour to write it down, 1 hour to bring it back. Every single time you have to make a tweak. What if there's 10 tweaks? All right, times that 2 hours by 10. You're going to spend an extra 20 hours on a mix? What if there's a month that goes by and then a couple more tweaks? So you got to save everything forever. You got to also notate it all, and you've got 20 hours plus on each mix. You think the money today in mixing, like what people will pay for a mix, you think it's justified to spend that much extra time? It's way different than laziness. It's just not smart. That's all it is, if you ask me. Granted, this is my opinion, but it's not smart. It's also not coming from somebody who's trying to do constant work every day and make a living off it. It's coming from an audiophile probably who wants to make things as great as possible and they don't care if it costs an extra 20 hours or more to do things. Nobody should be thinking that way if they're trying to make this into a career, because you will freaking drown. All right. So when I see stuff like that, it really irks me because it's not laziness. It's just not smart to put yourself in a position where you got to recall 1,000 knobs and then keep every time notate it and then recall it again. Why would you ever want to do that? Out of your mind if you want to do that. It's got nothing to do with laziness. It's just ridiculous. So that's why people who use the consoles today, they do use it in a template fashion. That's what they do. They rarely touch anything at all. They're using it as a template. They barely touch it. Barely. And they're willing to accept, more often than not, rather than notating everything like crazy, they're more willing to accept the slightly different changes in the mix here and there. Not me. I want it to be exactly the same. And that's the same reason why I would never run tracks through a console and then print it back into the DAW and then make tweaks there on the mix and then run it through the console summing, because it makes no sense to do that. The client approved the mix in the DAW. Now you're going to change it on them? Anytime you change anything, run the stuff back through the console, it will change the way things sound. If the EQ is pushing a little more in one frequency spectrum than another, all of a sudden the guitars are a little more clear. You just spent tweaks, and multiple tweaks probably, making that right and making them happy, and now you're going to change it by summing through the console at the end after they've approved it? That makes less sense than anything. I've never heard of that making any sense. That's the absolute craziest thing I've ever heard. So I'm just saying, once they've approved the thing, you're definitely not running it through the console again. What sense would that make? I understand the concept of maybe summing it through the console doesn't make as much difference as whatever, but then we're getting into the how much difference again. How much difference? If there's a difference, then there's a difference. So put yourself, the point I'm trying to illustrate is put yourself in a position to win, which means put yourself in a position where you don't have to notate the knobs every time. Put yourself in a position where you don't have to spend 20 plus hours every time you're doing a bunch of recalls for somebody to change stuff up. Put yourself in a position where you can still get the best sound possible by summing through stuff and printing it out, but it's in a way that's a fail-safe where you're getting that sound without having to remember anything. Put yourself in smart positions to be able to get from one place to another and do as much work as possible. These are all factors. As soon as any of these get sacrificed, oh, now I can't do as much work as possible because of all the time it takes, it's no longer a benefit. You have to realize what the benefits are and where they are, and realize how the world has changed when it comes to people think it's normal to do a bunch of tweaks today, a bunch of mix revisions. So count on that. So nobody in their mind would want to do that, especially they don't have the band near them, in front of them. No one's going to do that indefinitely forever and keep messing with stuff every time, recalling and then noting and recalling and then noting. No one's wanting... Change with the times, or you risk getting left behind. So that's the point. And with the times, in my opinion, doesn't mean mixing all in the box. It means be smarter. Come up with a way to do it that you don't have to do that. That's all it means. Come up with a way where you can mix in and out of the box and not have to do that. And having attachments that make you, or not attachments, having the need to take a plane and to fly around the world. Like, if it gets to a point where I'm like that, I can guarantee you it will affect my psyche of, is this really worth it anymore? And then I'll start to believe that I'm so good that maybe I don't have to. Maybe I could just be in the box. But again, this is like, why would you want to add that to the conversation? The fact that I'm not needing to be flying around the world and working in that way, and I can work in a studio every day. The fact that that's going on, and that was going on at the time when I used the DAW only and compared it to this and wanted at that time to make it work in the DAW so bad only, I wanted it more than anything. Could have sold so much stuff, done anything else with the money. I wanted that more probably than you do. And I realized that it's just not possible. Not for me, at least. And I don't know where you are, but this isn't my first video I've made. I've made over 100, I think it's close to 150 videos. I know what I'm talking about. And I can also tell you that there's no chance in my experience that this is just something that's the same for everybody. You have to realize the human psychology factor that goes with this. And you have to realize that if you're just listening, plain old listening, that's it, I don't believe you'll come to this conclusion. And I believe the people that want to believe this have never tried it because they're not willing to risk the money to try it. But you should, and you should do it in a way where you can return it if you don't like it, because I'm not saying everyone needs to be rich to do this. You just need to try it to see if there's a difference. And if you can't afford it, figure out a way to afford it once you've done enough work where you're getting paid enough where you can actually afford it. Then you'll be able to get it. But you could try it at any time on a return policy and figure it out. All right. You could figure this out for yourself by trying it and doing in your own studio. Use your ears. That way you'll know at your skill level, is it worth it or not? Because the better in tune your ears are, the more you're going to hear different things. So at certain people's skill level, they won't notice a difference because their ears they can't hear it. But at a certain level, you will notice a difference. And again, that's in my opinion. Maybe you won't notice a difference and your ears are at the top of the top because you're Grammy winning all day. Maybe. Not going to say that that's not possible, but I don't believe that. I don't believe that. And that's why I can make a video like this, because look in my description. There's no links. Nobody's paying me. There's not a freaking thing there that you could click to buy something, because that's not what I do. Look at all my other videos. This is not what I do. I speak from the heart, from my experience. That's it. I don't think there's a ton more to say on this. I think people need to try for themselves. And I believe personally, everybody who thinks that everybody's listening to a couple people doesn't realize that it's split down the middle. There's people that believe one way and people that believe the other way. And people want to believe that, people like Andrew Sheps, that's who they want to believe. Okay, but just realize there's just as many people on the other side that don't believe that. So it's far from an over conversation in the world. It's far from something that's one-sided in beliefs. Don't let anyone tell you that it's one-sided in beliefs. It's really not. People believe both sides of this thing. And your particular brand of converter that you like or not is also personal. And it's not just the converters, like I'm telling you, it's the converters that feed things. That's what converters are for. The DA side of conversion is actually feeding something. And what it feeds matters. And then what your chain of the mix bus matters. Whatever is in this is going to be different than what you get in the box. I can guarantee you that. It's different than what you get in the box. And this doesn't matter about anything other than how you use it. And that's why if you do these, I forget the company that does it, but they take the emulation of what it sounds like. It's like an impulse response kind of thing, but for gear. And they figure out how to make a plugin with that so that you could use that and get the same sound. It won't work the same because it's ones and zeros and it's not analog. So because it's not in the real analog domain, when you push into it, it doesn't do what it would do in the analog domain. No matter what algorithm they create, no matter what metric they use to figure out this, to make it the same, it won't be the same. That's what I'm saying. Okay? I just want to link to that last video I did on the Pro Converters, so anybody who's seeing this for the first time and didn't see that can catch up to where we are at the moment. But I just want to leave you guys with this. Also keep in mind that there is no right answer. I've said it a couple times. This is a split belief thing. So, you figure it out for yourself. I recommend that highly because that's what I did. And I'll tell you, I'm never going back in the box until something happens in my life where now I need to, because I'm flying, I'm moving around all the time, needing to do it. That's when I would consider it again. And you should consider, if the people talking to you are in that position, then can you really trust what they're saying 1000%? Or is the human psyche taking over a little bit and making it where they want to believe that because they're moving around so much? I don't know. You figure that out, because I don't think it's something that people do even consciously. I think it's a subconscious thing. Just like if I was to move it all around, I would be thinking that way. Okay, so if you liked it, run a transformer through the like button, slap a freaking pro level converter on that subscribe button. Do something. It really helps the channel. And people like me who put their heart and soul into what we say and what we're thinking about, and this is my life for a long time. That's what makes us happy. People listening. So take it easy. Talk to you guys soon. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this.